In the icy waters of the North Atlantic, where storms roar and winds carve the horizon, fleets of European fishing vessels set out on their voyages. Their mission to catch two of the most prized fish of the northern seas, cod and halibut. For centuries, these species have been at the very heart of coastal economies and cultures. Cod, with its mild flavor and ability to be preserved for months, once salted and dried, became the backbone of diets across Europe. Halibut, with its dense, meaty texture, earned the title steak of the sea, often reserved for fine dining and special occasions. Together, these fish represent not only food, but also wealth, tradition, and survival. Modern fleets today use longline fishing, a method designed for both scale and selectivity. Unlike giant purse seines or bottom trawls that sweep across the ocean indiscriminately, longlines stretch for tens of kilometers, carrying thousands of baited hooks. Each hook is carefully designed to target large cod and halibut, minimizing the capture of unwanted species. As the ship's deck crew feeds out, the massive line winches hum and the hooks disappear beneath the waves. Hours later, the line is hauled back in fish by fish, hook by hook. Cod gleams silver and white under the floodlights, while the occasional halibut, massive, flat, and powerful, thrashes against the pull before being heaved aboard. It is slow, exhausting work, but it yields fish of the highest quality, often with minimal damage, ready to be processed into valuable exports. But the story of European longline fishing is not just about technique. It is a story woven from centuries of history, from Viking voyages in wooden boats to the rise of industrial fleets, to today's debate over sustainability and the survival of marine ecosystems. This is the world of cod and halibut, a world of storms, sacrifice, tradition, and resilience. The story of cod and halibut fishing stretches back more than 1,000 years. Long before modern engines and sonar, seafarers of northern Europe depended on these fish for survival. The Vikings were among the first to master the cod-rich waters of Norway, Iceland, and Greenland. In their rugged wooden boats, they cast simple nets and handlines, hauling up enormous cod from the freezing depths. These fish were not eaten fresh alone. They were preserved by salting and air drying on wooden racks built along the coast. The result, a product known as stockfish, could last for months, even years, without spoiling. Stockfish became a form of currency traded across Europe, fueling not only diets, but entire economies. By the Middle Ages, cod and halibut had become central to the diets of Catholic Europe, where religious fasting days forbade meat but allowed fish. Portuguese sailors carried dried cod on voyages to the Americas. Basque fishermen crossed the Atlantic in search of rich fishing grounds off Newfoundland long before Columbus's famous journey. Cod was no longer just food. It was a commodity that built trade routes, financed expeditions, and linked distant cultures. The 19th and 20th centuries transformed fishing into an industry. Steamships replaced sails, and soon diesel engines brought more power and endurance to the fleet. Fishing trips grew longer. Vessels ventured deeper into the Atlantic and Arctic seas. Nets became larger. Long lines stretched for tens of kilometers, and onboard freezing rooms allowed ships to preserve fish, instantly keeping them fresh during voyages that lasted for weeks. By this time, a single fishing vessel was no longer just a boat. It was a floating factory with massive storage holds, powerful engines, sleeping quarters for dozens of men, and processing decks where fish could be cleaned, gutted, and frozen immediately. Crews formed tight-knit communities at sea, often spending months away from home, bound together by the hardships of storms, isolation, and relentless work. But as fishing power grew, so did pressure on the oceans. By the mid-20th century, European waters were yielding unprecedented catches, and governments encouraged ever larger fleets to fuel booming populations. For cod and halibut, this industrial expansion brought both prosperity and peril. Today's European longline vessels are marvels of engineering. They are designed to handle some of the harshest seas on Earth, from the icy waters of Greenland to the storm-battered North Sea. At the heart of the operation is the Longline system. A single main line can extend for tens of kilometers, carrying thousands of baited hooks. These are lowered slowly into the ocean using hydraulic winches, the line stretching out behind the vessel like a steel spine through the waves. Each hook carries a small piece of bait, often squid or mackerel, carefully chosen to lure cod or halibut without attracting too many unwanted species. The setting of the line is a moment of precision. Fishermen must calculate the depth, current, and timing because cod and halibut feed near the seabed, often at depths of 200 to 600 meters. Once the line is deployed, it drifts silently beneath the waves for hours. On the surface, the crew waits. When it's time to haul the line back, the real work begins. The winches pull the line steadily, meter by meter, hook by hook. Each catch is a moment of suspense. Sometimes the hooks rise empty. Sometimes a cod of 10 kilos thrashes its way onto the deck. And sometimes a massive halibut longer than a man weighing hundreds of kilos emerges from the deep, demanding several crew members to drag it aboard. The deck becomes a blur of motion. Crew members unhook fish gut, then bleed them and wash them before passing them directly into the freezing rooms below deck. Every step is designed to preserve freshness. On modern vessels, flash freezing systems chill the fish to 60 degrees within minutes, locking in quality that rivals even fresh catch at port. But life on board is not only about technology, it is also about endurance. Shifts can last 12 to 16 hours, often in temperatures below freezing. The deck is slick with ice, and seawater waves crash overhead, and the roar of the winch drowns out all but the loudest shouts. Mistakes are unforgiving. A slip, a missed step, or a moment of fatigue can lead to disaster. For the men and women aboard, vigilance is survival. Despite these dangers, there is also pride. Every cod or halibut hauled up is more than a fish. It is the result of centuries of knowledge, of family traditions passed from father to son, of a community's bond with the sea. When the hold is finally filled, when tons of silver and white fish lie stacked in icy rows, the cheers of the crew echo across the ocean like a victory cry. Cod and halibut are not just fish, they are economic lifelines. For centuries, they have sustained entire nations, powered economies, and even shaped trade routes. In Europe, cod was once referred to as white gold, a resource so valuable that wars were fought over fishing grounds. Today, the industry remains a pillar of national economies in countries like Norway, Iceland, Spain, and Portugal. Each successful voyage brings in millions of euros. For companies, this revenue fuels investments in newer vessels, advanced freezing technology, and automated processing systems. For crew members, it means steady pay, sometimes with bonuses tied directly to the size of the catch. And for coastal communities, the ripple effects are immense: processing jobs on shore, transport and logistics work, export businesses, and even restaurants that thrive on serving fresh catch. But the story isn't just financial. Cod and halibut are deeply embedded in culture. In Portugal, dried salted cod, known as bacalhau, is at the heart of hundreds of traditional recipes. In Norway, winter cod festivals are as much cultural events as they are economic necessities, bringing together generations of fishermen, families, and tourists. And in Iceland, cod is central to the national identity, celebrated in art, folklore, and history. Yet prosperity brings responsibility. The 20th century taught a hard lesson. Overfishing and unregulated expansion nearly collapsed cod stocks in several regions. Canada's 1992 moratorium on cod fishing after stock collapse remains a warning to the entire world. Europe, learning from this, introduced strict quotas, licenses, and satellite tracking of vessels. Today, a fishing company cannot simply sail out and catch without limit. Every ton is monitored, every trip recorded. Still, the pressures remain. Global demand for protein-rich seafood keeps rising while climate change alters the very ecosystems where these fish thrive. Warmer oceans are shifting cod populations northward, forcing vessels to travel farther and burn more fuel. Ocean acidification affects plankton and smaller species that cod rely on for food. The balance between economic need and ecological survival has never been more delicate. For this reason, sustainability certifications such as the Marine Stewardship Council (MSC) have become a badge of honor. Fisheries that meet the strict standards can access premium markets in the US, Japan, and across Europe. Consumers are increasingly willing to pay more for fish labeled as responsibly sourced, and companies that adapt are reaping both economic and reputational rewards. But in the villages along Norway's fjords or the harbors of Iceland, the story is simpler. Fishing is still about survival, family, and continuity. The same ocean that once fed the Vikings continues to feed their descendants. The sight of nets, longlines, and rows of fish drying in the cold wind is not just a business, it's heritage. Life on a longline fishing vessel is not for the faint of heart. Imagine weeks at sea, far from the warmth of home, surrounded only by steel salt water and the relentless roar of the ocean. For the crew, each day begins before dawn, often with icy winds cutting through their clothing. Their shifts can last 12, sometimes 16 hours, as longlines stretching for miles are hauled in hook by hook. The work is grueling and repetitive. Each hook must be checked, each fish removed, gutted, and immediately transferred to the freezing compartments below deck. Yet within that repetition lies skill. A fisherman can tell by the tension of a line whether it carries a cod, a halibut, or nothing at all. They know by instinct when the ocean is about to change. When a storm is rising, or when a school of fish might pass beneath them. Meals aboard ship are simple but comforting. Hot bread, potatoes, salted meat, and of course fish freshly caught and cooked on board. In the cramped mess hall, laughter and stories provide rare relief from the monotony. Sailors swap tales of legendary catches, of near disasters and raging storms, and of ancestors who worked these same seas centuries ago. But dangers are constant companions. On deck, a moment's slip on the icy surface can send a man overboard. Winches and heavy cables can snap with lethal force. Storms can rise suddenly with waves towering higher than the ship's deck. Many coastal families know the grief of losing fathers, brothers, or sons to the sea. In fishing villages, memorials stand by the harbor to honor those who never returned. Still, despite the hardship, the bond between crew members runs deep. They are not just co-workers, but brothers at sea. They celebrate victories together like the sight of a net heavy with cod shining silver under the deck lights. And they shoulder losses together when days of searching bring only empty hooks. For the families back home, fishing is more than just an income. It is an identity. Children grow up watching their parents head out before sunrise. They help mend nets, dry fish, and prepare for the next season. Festivals celebrating cod or halibut are community events that keep traditions alive, even as technology transforms the industry. And for the fishermen themselves, the call of the ocean is irresistible. Many admit that even after decades of hardship, they cannot imagine life away from the sea. The smell of salt, the cry of seabirds, the thrill of hauling a line heavy with fish, all of it becomes part of who they are. In these stories of endurance, courage, and tradition, we find the human heart of Europe's longline fishing. Behind every fillet of cod on a dinner plate in Paris, every halibut steak in a Tokyo restaurant, there are men and women whose lives are bound to the ocean people, who risk everything so the world can taste the bounty of the sea. The story of European longline fishing is not just about the present. It is also about the uncertain future. The seas that have fed communities for centuries are now facing new and complex pressures. Climate change is altering migration routes, pushing cod and halibut into colder, deeper waters. Fishermen who once knew exactly when and where to cast their lines now find themselves chasing moving targets, burning more fuel, and investing more days for smaller catches. Governments and scientific organizations across Europe are racing to respond. Quotas are being tightened to prevent the mistakes of the past when overfishing nearly collapsed cod stocks in parts of the North Atlantic. Satellites now track every commercial vessel, ensuring compliance with seasonal bans and catch limits. Research institutes are testing selective hooks, LED light systems, and even AI-driven sonar tools to reduce bycatch and protect marine biodiversity. International diplomacy plays a critical role. After Brexit disputes over North Sea fishing grounds erupted between Britain and the European Union, with clashes between French, Spanish, and British fleets making headlines. Beyond Europe, Russia and Norway continue to assert dominance over rich Arctic fishing zones, while sanctions and trade shifts complicate the seafood market. Every cod fillet on a dinner plate is shaped not only by the ocean, but also by geopolitics. Sustainability is more than a buzzword. It is a necessity. Today's consumers from Tokyo to New York demand proof that their seafood is harvested responsibly. Certifications like the Marine Stewardship Council, MSC, have become gateways into premium markets. European companies that embrace sustainability, investing in ultra-fast freezing technology, cooperative quota systems, and responsible fishing gear are not just protecting the oceans, they are also securing their economic future. Yet the soul of this industry still lies with the fishermen. In Norway's Lofoten Islands, Iceland's fjords, and Portugal's rugged coasts, traditions endure. Festivals celebrate the cod season. Children still learn to mend nets beside their grandparents. And in the darkest Arctic nights, crews aboard longliners still look up at skies blazing with northern lights, finding meaning in the rhythm of sea and stars. The future of cod and halibut fishing in Europe rests on a fragile balance. The balance between feeding the world and conserving the sea, between tradition and technology, between profit and protection. If that balance is maintained, the story of these fisheries will not end. It will continue as it always has, with new generations of sailors braving the waves, guided by both the wisdom of the past and the innovations of tomorrow.